I never expected much for my birthday. Maybe a couple of texts, maybe a voicemail I'd listened to 2 days late. But what I saw on Facebook that night changed everything. There, front and center, was my family, surrounding my younger sister Chloe with flowers, champagne, and a tiered birthday cake. The caption read, "So proud of our shining star, the only one who makes us smile." On my birthday, I left a comment. "Looks lovely," my mother replied. "At least someone's worth celebrating this year." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I smiled, replied, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then I logged into my bank, canceled one transfer, and sent 2 emails. Before I take you through what happened next, how a single night revealed everything they'd hidden and everything I'd allowed. Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground, even when it means standing alone. I woke up on my 29th birthday to the quiet hum of my apartment in Seattle, the kind of silence that had become oddly familiar over the years. No messages, no missed calls, just the pale light of morning slipping through the blinds and the soft clicking of the coffee maker starting its routine. Faithful. Reliable. Unlike most people in my life. My name is Rachel Bennett, and in my family, I've always been the responsible one, the steady one, but never the celebrated one. Growing up, birthdays were never a big deal for me. At least, not in the Bennett household. My mother, Linda, often forgot until dinner. My father, Martin, remembered only if she reminded him. And Chloe, my younger sister by 3 years, was usually too busy with something urgent to notice. It had always been that way, so I never really expected balloons or surprise cakes or even a simple dinner. Still, I suppose some part of me hoped that maybe this year would be different. I moved through my usual morning routine without much thought. Shower, yogurt, coffee, 2 cups, one for the exhaustion, one for the hope. As I sat at the kitchen counter scrolling through emails, I reminded myself not to expect anything. That way, I wouldn't be disappointed. But even as I told myself that, a familiar ache crept in, an ache I'd long ago learned to carry quietly. It's strange, isn't it? How you can be so present in a family and still feel completely unseen. I was the child who never caused trouble, the one who brought home perfect grades, the one who got into the University of Washington on scholarship, worked 30 hours a week at the campus bookstore, graduated with honors, and never asked for anything. But none of that ever felt like enough. Not when compared to Chloe. Chloe was the golden one, the daughter with the drama, the stories, the flair. She changed majors 3 times at Arizona State, dropped out of 2 internships, and spent a semester finding herself in Costa Rica. And every step of the way, my parents held her up like she was the beating heart of our family. I used to think if I just worked harder, accomplished more, they'd finally see me. But visibility doesn't come from perfection when you're cast in the role of the stable one. It comes from need, from noise. And I was never noisy. I used to think there was dignity in being the one they could rely on. And maybe there was. But the cost of that dignity was invisibility. As I headed to work that morning, the sky above the city hung heavy with gray, as if even the weather couldn't be bothered to celebrate. I parked in the same garage I had for the past 5 years, walked the same route to the same office, where I was now a senior accountant. No balloons on my desk, no happy birthday emails, not even from HR. Just spreadsheets, numbers, the usual rhythm of a life built on structure. And still, I whispered it to myself, quietly, like a prayer I wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Happy birthday, Rachel. It happened just after lunch. I was sitting at my desk, eating a salad I'd picked up from the cafe downstairs, scrolling mindlessly through Facebook while half listening to a conference call. That's when I saw it. A post. Fresh, glossy, curated like a magazine spread, sitting at the top of my feed. My family, gathered in our parents' living room in Bellevue, the same room where we'd once held holiday dinners and birthday parties. Balloons, wrapped gifts, and the old celebration banner we used for special occasions hung over the fireplace. In the center of it all was Chloe, smiling like she owned the world. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd gotten the date wrong. Maybe today wasn't actually my birthday. Maybe there had been some mix-up. But no, the calendar on my screen confirmed it. May 19th. My birthday. Not Chloe's. Not a holiday. Just mine. I clicked into the post, heart racing, scrolling through photo after photo of my family celebrating her. There was my mother, beaming with pride as she lit candles on a cake. My father, standing behind Chloe with his hand on her shoulder. Aunts and uncles who hadn't bothered to send me a birthday text were clapping in the background. Even my grandmother, who claimed she no longer traveled, was seated on the couch with a slice of cake in her lap. The caption hit me like a punch to the chest. The only one worth celebrating today. I stared at it, blinking. Surely, they didn't mean that literally. But the longer I looked, the more obvious it became. This wasn't some innocent gathering. It wasn't a coincidence. They had chosen this day, my day, to throw a surprise party for Chloe, to gather everyone in a room and pretend I didn't exist. I stood up quickly, clutching my phone, and walked briskly to the bathroom, locking myself inside the farthest stall. I sat down on the closed lid and opened the post again, zooming in on every detail. The cake was homemade, frosted in Chloe's favorite pastel colors. The decorations were familiar, pulled from our family's party box in the basement. And the smiles. They weren't casual. They were proud, joyful. Like this was exactly the celebration they'd all been waiting for. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not at work. I wiped my face with a paper towel, took a deep breath, and returned to my desk. Olivia Peterson, a coworker who sat across from me, looked up as I sat down. "You okay?" she asked gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a migraine coming on," I lied, offering a weak smile. I tried to focus on the quarterly reports, but the numbers blurred on the screen. At 3:45, I opened Facebook again. The post had already racked up dozens of likes and comments. "Congratulations, Chloe. So proud of you. You deserve all the love today." For what? What exactly were they congratulating her for? She hadn't graduated. It wasn't her birthday. It wasn't even a personal milestone. It was just a random Tuesday that happened to be mine. I hovered over the comment box, unsure of what to write. My fingers trembled slightly before I typed 2 words. Nice cake. I hit enter and closed the app. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. My mother had replied. At least someone's worth baking for. I stared at the screen, breathless. That wasn't just a passive-aggressive remark. That was a message. Deliberate, cruel, final. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not shattered, but crystallized. A cold, perfect clarity settled over me like a snowfall. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I was the expendable one, the backup plan. The quiet one they could ignore without consequence. And maybe they'd always assumed I would stay quiet. I smiled to myself, not out of happiness, but resolve. Then I typed 4 words in reply. Enjoy it while you can. No exclamation mark. No emojis. Just truth, quietly delivered. By the end of the day, I had made a decision. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg to be seen. I would simply show them. Through action, not emotion. What happens when the invisible daughter finally stops playing her role? And the first domino. It had already fallen. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or pace or draft angry texts I'd never send. I sat in silence on my living room floor, a glass of wine untouched beside me, scrolling through old memories I had long tried to ignore. Because the truth is, this birthday wasn't the beginning. It was the most obvious continuation of a pattern I had spent my entire life trying not to see. I was 8 years old when I first understood what I meant to my parents. Chloe was 5. I had just won the district spelling bee, beating kids 2 grades above me. I came home beaming, my certificate crinkled in my tiny hands, excitement bubbling in my chest. I still remember the feeling, that hope that maybe this time, they'd be proud. Not now. Rachel, my mother said as I stepped through the door. Chloe learned a new dance routine. Show mommy and daddy, sweetie. I stood there, still in my school uniform, watching as Chloe twirled across the living room carpet, her arms flailing in every direction. My father clapped. My mother gasped like she was witnessing brilliance. I held my certificate a little tighter, then a little looser, until it curled from the pressure. Later that night, I taped it to the fridge myself, using the last of the Scotch tape from the junk drawer. The next morning, it was gone, replaced by Chloe's finger painting. I told myself it didn't matter, that the spelling bee wasn't a big deal, that maybe I was overreacting, but that moment never left me. Neither did the others. Chloe's Sweet 16 was a full-scale production. 50 guests, a rented DJ, a dress my mother swore they couldn't afford, but somehow made happen. My 16th. A store-bought cake after dinner, and a promise they'd make it up to me later. Later never came. I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA, was editor of the yearbook, and got into the University of Washington with a partial scholarship. My parents came to the graduation, but left early because Chloe had a minor part in her school play. I gave my valedictorian speech to a sea of proud parents. Mine were already in the car, halfway across town. They always had a reason, always had an explanation. Your sister needs us more. You're the strong one. Don't make everything about you. But what they never had was the awareness that I noticed, that I remembered. That being the strong one didn't mean I didn't feel it, deeply, every time they chose her over me. College was when the gap widened into something more tangible, measurable, even. Despite my scholarship, I worked 30 hours a week at the campus bookstore. I juggled classes, shifts, and student loans, scraping together rent and groceries. Chloe, meanwhile, was enrolled full-time at Arizona State. No scholarship, average grades, changing majors every semester. My parents covered her tuition, her apartment, her credit cards. When I asked about the imbalance, my father simply said, "She doesn't have your work ethic. She needs the help." It wasn't said with malice, just a kind of detached resignation, like it was a fact of nature, gravity, rain, the hierarchy of their love. I kept going. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. At the ceremony, my parents clapped politely and left halfway through the dinner to pick Chloe up from the airport. She'd just returned from a semester abroad in Costa Rica, funded entirely by them. "You understand, don't you?" Rachel, my mother had said, wrapping her scarf around her neck as she stood to leave. She had a long flight. I did understand. Too well. After college, when I got my first job offer, I invited them to celebrate over dinner. Halfway through the appetizer, my mother interrupted me. "That's nice, honey. But guess what Chloe's dropping out of her grad program? She's decided to take time off to find herself. Isn't that brave, brave?" That was the word they used for quitting, for needing, for depending. I had spent my entire life building, enduring, rising, only to be told that the person who walked away deserved applause for being courageous. And I clapped along. I always did. Until now. Because now, as I sat on my living room floor, the memories wrapping themselves around me like ivy, I saw it all for what it was. Not just a pattern, but a choice. Repeated, reinforced, and protected. They didn't forget my birthday. They erased it. And maybe that was the moment I stopped needing their recognition and started demanding my own. By the next morning, the numbness had given way to something sharper. Focus. The kind of clarity that doesn't just sit with you, but pushes you forward. I woke up before my alarm, made coffee without thinking, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger. It was about understanding exactly how deep this went, and how far I'd let it go unchecked. I started with my bank account, the one my father had helped me set up when I got my first full-time job. I remembered his words clearly. "We'll start a shared investment fund. Rachel, something for our future. You, me, and your mom. It'll help with our retirement. Maybe even some real estate if the market's right." At the time, I thought it was responsible, practical, a symbol of trust. Now, I wasn't so sure. I pulled up the transaction history, filtering for recurring withdrawals. One entry stood out immediately. $500 deducted automatically every month since Chloe graduated from Arizona State. According to my records, that money was going into what we called the Bennett Family Investment Account. But when I traced the routing number, it didn't link to a mutual fund or a retirement account. It was a basic checking account, held jointly by my parents. And it had one primary purpose: to pay Chloe's rent, utilities, and, most nauseating of all, her credit card minimums. I sat there for a moment, frozen. I hadn't just been ignored emotionally. I'd been exploited financially. 3 years, 36 months, $18,000. Gone. I checked the lease agreement my parents had asked me to co-sign when Chloe moved to Seattle. Just a formality. My father had said, "She doesn't have credit yet. You won't be responsible for anything." But there it was, in bold, black ink. My name listed as the primary tenant, Chloe listed as occupant. From a legal standpoint, the apartment was mine. From the landlord's perspective, I was the one renting it, and generously letting my sister stay there. I wasn't just co-signing, I was the one on the hook. My hands trembled slightly as I minimized the lease and opened my email. I typed Daniel Cho, Seattle Leasing Group, into the search bar. There it was, the email thread from 3 years ago, when we'd first signed the lease. I stared at his last message, confirming that rent would be auto-debited from a checking account provided by the Bennett family. Mine. I picked up my phone and called Noah Reyes, my financial advisor. We hadn't spoken in months, but when he picked up, his voice was calm, steady, exactly what I needed. "Noah, I need to go over some family-related financial obligations," I said, keeping my voice even. Specifically, how to remove myself from them. He walked me through everything. As primary leaseholder, I was legally responsible for the apartment, but I had the right to withdraw with 30 days' notice to the landlord. I could stop the automatic payments immediately. I could freeze the joint account my parents controlled. I could reroute future deposits. And most importantly, I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. "This feels sudden," Noah said gently. "Are you sure you want to move on all of this right now?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. When the call ended, I sat quietly, letting it settle in. I had choices. I had rights. And for the first time in a long time, I had the will to use them. I began researching tenant laws in Washington state, what was required, what notices needed to be filed, what protections existed. I opened tabs for budget apartments within Chloe's actual price range, not to punish her, but to give her a dose of the reality I'd been living since I was 19. Doubt tried to creep in. Was I overreacting? Was I really going to pull financial support over a birthday party? But this wasn't about a single day. This was about years, decades, of being expected to give without consent, to carry weight without acknowledgement, to sacrifice without thanks. This was about the moment I realized I had allowed it, and the moment I chose not to anymore. By the time the sun dipped behind the buildings, I had a plan. It wasn't loud, it wasn't vengeful, but it was final. I would cut the payments, notify the landlord, document everything, send a single, clear message to my family, not in anger, but in truth. You can only take from someone for so long before they realize what they're worth. And I was done being taken. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because I was alert, focused, the kind of clarity that doesn't bring rest, but movement. By morning, my apartment was still and quiet, sunlight spilling through the windows like it always did. But everything inside me had shifted. There was no panic, no second guessing, just calm resolve and a growing sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I brewed coffee, sat at my desk, and opened a blank folder on my desktop. I labeled it Financial Independence, not out of irony, but precision. That's what this was. Not retaliation, not rebellion, just the first step toward reclaiming the parts of myself I'd unknowingly handed over. I gathered everything I needed: the lease agreement, bank statements tracing every dollar that had left my account, screenshots of email chains with my father, a copy of my original contribution memo to what was supposed to be a joint retirement fund, and finally, a screenshot of my mother's Facebook comment. At least someone's worth baking for. That last one wasn't financial, but it was proof. Proof of how long I'd been dismissed. Even when I showed up quietly and consistently. At 8:30 sharp, I called Angela Kim, a friend of a friend and a family law attorney I'd once worked with on a small estate matter. She picked up on the second ring. "Angela, I'm disentangling my finances from my family," I said calmly. "I need guidance on making it clean, legal, and documented." After a long pause, she said gently, "You're doing the right thing. Just make sure everything you send is factual, not emotional. You don't need permission, you need clarity." That word again, clarity. After we hung up, I logged into my bank account and canceled the $500 automatic transfer to the account my parents controlled. With 3 clicks, it was done. I paused for a moment, watching the screen refresh, then moved the exact same amount into my personal savings, a small shift in digits. But to me, it felt symbolic, a turning point, like the first moment you realize you're not just surviving, you're choosing. Then I began writing. The first email was to Daniel Cho, Chloe's landlord. I kept it formal and direct. "Dear Mr. Cho, I'm writing to inform you that I will be withdrawing as the primary leaseholder from the apartment at 512 Oak Ridge Avenue, currently occupied by Chloe Bennett. Per our agreement, I am providing 30 days' notice, after which I will no longer be financially or legally responsible for the lease. Effective immediately, I have canceled all automatic payments associated with the unit. I will cover the final 30 days of rent directly to ensure clarity and compliance. I've attached the relevant section of the lease and welcome any next steps required from your office. Sincerely, Rachel Bennett." I read it twice, then hit send. The second email was harder, but simpler. It was to my parents. "Mom, Dad, I'm writing to inform you that I've stopped all automatic payments from my accounts that have been contributing to Chloe's living expenses. I've also notified the landlord that I will be withdrawing from the lease agreement. Per the contract, I'll cover the final month of rent, but beyond that, I will not continue financial support. These arrangements were made without my informed consent. I believed I was contributing to a family investment fund for your retirement, not subsidizing Chloe's apartment and credit cards. This is not a negotiation. It's a boundary. Please plan accordingly. Rachel. No threats, no insults, just facts. And for the first time in a very long time, my words were mine alone, unapologetic and uncompromising. I sat back in my chair, feeling something release in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for years, and finally exhaled. Around noon, I took a walk around the block. My neighbor, Nathan Cole, was out with his dog and waved from across the street. "Happy belated birthday, Rachel," he called. "Everything okay?" "Actually, yes," I said, surprising even myself. "I think it will be." And I meant it. The rest of the day passed in measured silence. No calls, no emails, no frantic texts. Just a strange, quiet stillness that felt more like progress than waiting. I poured myself a glass of wine that evening, pulled a single cupcake from the box I'd bought 2 days ago, lit a match, and watched the flame flicker atop the frosting. I made no wish this time, because I wasn't waiting for something to change. I was becoming the change, and I would never let them take that from me again. The first 3 days after I sent those emails were filled with nothing. No calls, no messages, no angry voicemails or frantic texts. Not from Chloe, not from my parents, not even a vague comment on Facebook. Just silence. Thick, deliberate, and loud in all the wrong ways. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from absence. It was the kind that follows shock. The kind that waits, gathers strength, plans its next move. At first, I kept checking my phone more than I wanted to admit. I told myself I was just being cautious, making sure the landlord received my message, watching for anything from the bank. But the truth was simpler. I was bracing for impact. Because when a family has lived in a certain rhythm for decades, the moment you break that rhythm, the system pushes back. On the fourth day, the push came. It started with a text from Chloe at 10:37 a.m. "There's some kind of banking error. My rent payment got rejected. Can you check your account?" I read it slowly. No greeting, no punctuation, just assumption. I typed back a single line. "Not an error. I've discontinued financial support. Check with mom and dad." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back again. I waited, watching the screen like it might blink out something different this time. Finally, her reply arrived. "WTF, Rachel. Is this because I didn't call on your birthday I was going to?" I stared at that message, letting it sit, letting her words weigh themselves against the years I'd carried her, protected her, paid for her. And then I did what I hadn't done in years. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about a missed phone call. It wasn't about a single birthday. It was about a lifetime of imbalance, and a decision to stop pretending it didn't hurt. That evening, my mother called. I let it ring until it stopped. Her voicemail appeared a minute later. I listened with the phone on speaker while chopping vegetables for dinner. "Rachel, what is this nonsense about Chloe's apartment? Your father and I need you to call us back immediately. This isn't like you. It's irresponsible and, frankly, childish." Childish. I let out a short breath. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. I had been funding my sister's adult life without consent for 3 years. And I was the one acting childish. I texted back. "I'm not available to discuss this tonight. The email I sent explains everything necessary." Then I turned off my phone. The next morning at work, I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting, half to the fallout that was unfolding, half to the strange calm I still felt inside. I wasn't used to this version of myself. the one who didn't shrink when accused or apologize when she hadn't done anything wrong. At lunch, Olivia, my coworker, sat across from me with a sandwich in one hand and a curious look in her eyes. "You've seemed off this week. Want to talk about it?" I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "It's family stuff," I said. "Been building for years." She set down her sandwich. "Tell me." So I did. A shorter version. Of course. Just the essentials. The forgotten birthday. The money trail. The lies about the lease. The quiet unraveling of a dynamic I'd once believed was normal. When I finished, Olivia leaned back in her chair and shook her head slowly. "That's a lot," she said. "But good for you for finally standing up for yourself. Honestly, that kind of peace costs something, but it's worth it." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day. They were simple, but they were the kind I'd rarely heard from my own family. Words that affirmed I wasn't being dramatic. I was being honest and brave. That night, my father called. It surprised me. He wasn't the type to reach out directly unless prompted. I hesitated, then answered. "Hi, Dad." There was a long pause. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "I do," I said cautiously. "I got your email," he said. "About the lease, the account, all of it. And I owe you an explanation." I didn't speak. I waited. It started small. He continued. "Chloe needed help with the security deposit after school. We were tight that month. You'd just gotten promoted. You offered to help with family finances. Remember I offered to help with your retirement?" I said softly. "Not her rent." "I know," he admitted. It just became easier to let it go on. "Chloe's never been good with money. You always had it together. We didn't mean to take advantage. But you did." Another pause. "I know." For a moment, I almost softened. His voice wasn't defensive. It was tired, regretful, maybe even honest. "I'm not changing my mind," I said gently. "I didn't expect you to." He replied. "I just wanted you to know I get it. And I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix anything. But for the first time, I heard something from my father I hadn't heard in years. Recognition. And maybe that was the beginning of something new. Or maybe just the end of something I never should have allowed." The days that followed my father's call moved with a strange rhythm, slow but heavy, like the pause before a summer storm. Chloe's messages came in waves. Some were laced with sarcasm and fury. Others read like panicked confessions typed between tears. One minute she'd write, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." The next, "I'm sorry if I made you feel used. But this is extreme. Rachel." I answered only when necessary, and only with facts. Yes, I was the primary leaseholder. No, I would not resume payments. Yes, the 30-day notice was standard under Washington law. No, this was not a discussion. Meanwhile, Daniel Cho, the landlord, responded to my initial email with professionalism and promptness. "Miss Bennett, thank you for your notice. I've updated our records. You will remain responsible for rent through June 15th, after which your obligation ends. Your sister will need to qualify for the lease on her own or vacate the property. Attached are the transition documents. Please review and return at your earliest convenience." I signed and returned the paperwork that evening, copying both of my parents for full transparency. I didn't want a single detail left open to reinterpretation. No one would be able to say I'd acted recklessly or without warning. On day 9, I met with Dr. Karen Elliott, my therapist, for our regular session. I almost canceled, thinking I was too tired. But I'm glad I didn't. "How are you feeling about the steps you've taken?" she asked after I updated her. "Conflicted," I admitted. A part of me feels like I'm punishing Chloe for the way our parents treated me. Another part feels free. And a small part is still that 8-year-old girl, hoping they'll finally see me. All of those feelings are valid, she said. This isn't just about finances. It's about identity. About years of emotional labor and imbalance. Even now, you're still trying to make it fair. For them. She was right. I wasn't cutting people off. I was cutting patterns off. There's a difference. On the 10th day, I checked in with Noah Reyes, my financial advisor, to make sure everything had been secured. He confirmed that all automatic withdrawals had stopped and that the joint account had been fully closed. They haven't attempted any transactions since, he added. Good, I said, though I wasn't sure if the silence meant understanding or if it meant the storm was just changing shape. By day 11, everything was still quiet. And then, like clockwork, it broke. That evening, I received a group text from my mother. Family meeting tomorrow, 600 p.m. Your presence is required. This has gone far enough. There it was. The moment they'd all been circling. The reckoning. The scene. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. We all knew I would show up, because this wasn't just about Chloe's apartment, or the money, or even the birthday. This was about 28 years of swallowing my feelings so theirs could fill the room. And I wasn't doing that anymore. I left work early the next day. Told Teresa, my manager. It was a family issue. She nodded without prying, then added softly, You've been handling something quietly. I can tell. Whatever it is. I hope it brings you peace. I thanked her, packed my things, and headed home. I changed clothes, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself who I was now. I chose a navy dress. Simple, structured, professional. This wasn't a dinner. It was a deposition. At 5:45, I pulled into my parents' driveway. All the cars were already there. My mother's silver sedan, my father's truck, Chloe's scuffed Honda, parked crooked near the curb, still playing by her own rules. I took a deep breath, gathered the folder I'd prepared, the documents, screenshots, statements, and walked to the door. Before I could knock, it opened. My mother stood there, arms folded, her face unreadable. Glad you finally decided to explain yourself, she said. Hello, Mom, I replied. Then I stepped past her into the house. The living room had been arranged like an intervention. My father sat in his recliner. Chloe was curled on the couch, her eyes red. An empty chair waited, facing all of them. It was meant for me. I took my seat, placed the folder in my lap, folded my hands. I'm listening, I said. And for the first time in my life, I meant it not as a plea, but as a power. My mother didn't ease into the conversation. What were you thinking? Rachel, she said, her voice sharp and brittle. Canceling payments, emailing Chloe's landlord, threatening her housing. Is this your way of punishing us because we forgot your birthday? This isn't about my birthday, I said calmly. Though, yes, the party you threw for Chloe on my birthday was revealing. It wasn't a party. Chloe cut in, her voice shaky. It was just a celebration. I sold my first major piece at the gallery. It happened to fall on that day. A celebration with a cake, balloons, and the same banner you used at my graduation. I said, looking at my mother. And not one of you acknowledged what day it was. Not even a message. My mother looked away, her arms still crossed tightly over her chest. I was just teasing when I wrote that comment. You've always been so independent. We didn't think you cared about birthdays. I've been independent because I had to be, I said, more softly than I expected. Not because I didn't care. I learned early on that asking for anything from this family meant being disappointed. That's not fair, my father said from across the room. We supported you through school. Did you? I reached into my folder and pulled out a printed loan summary. Here's the $42,000 in student debt I took on while working 30 hours a week in college. You covered Chloe's tuition at Arizona State, her housing, even her trips abroad. But when I asked for help, you said you were saving for retirement. My mother's brow furrowed. We never asked you to sacrifice. No, I said, my voice steady. You just expected me to. Over and over again. I turned to Chloe. When was the last time you paid rent in full without help? She didn't answer. You've had 3 years to build credit, to grow, to learn how to manage on your own. But instead, our parents used my account, without telling me, to support your lifestyle. And you didn't think to ask where the money came from. Chloe looked stunned. I thought Mom and Dad were covering it. My father cleared his throat. It started small, he said. We didn't plan for it to go on like this. But it did, I replied. And nobody stopped to ask if I agreed. You made decisions about my money, my name, my credit, all because I've always been the one who has it together. My mother finally spoke, her voice cold. So what now? You're just walking away, cutting off your sister when she needs you most. I'm not abandoning her. I said, I'm setting boundaries. Chloe is 25 years old. It's time she learns to stand on her own. The way I had to. And us, she asked, her tone clipped. Are you cutting us off too? That depends, I said honestly. I'm open to rebuilding something, but only if it's based on mutual respect and truth. I'm done being the invisible one, the one who only matters when you need something. This is ridiculous, my mother muttered, standing. So we forgot your birthday. So what? Grow up. Rachel, Linda, my father said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Sit down. She froze. My father looked at me, then back at her. She's right, he said. We've treated her unfairly. I've seen it. And I've let it happen. Martin, she snapped. But he held up a hand. No. We've celebrated Chloe's every small victory and taken Rachel's success for granted. And I lied about the money. That's on me. I'm not proud of it. There was a long silence. No one moved. Finally, Chloe spoke, her voice quieter than before. I didn't know it was coming from you. I really didn't. I nodded. I believe you. But that doesn't change the fact that I've been carrying the weight of this family for years, and no one thought to ask how that felt. My mother sat slowly, her eyes downcast. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said. I'm doing this because I finally realized I matter, too. And if I keep allowing this dynamic, I'll lose more than just money. I'll lose myself. So what happens now? My father asked. Now, I said, standing with my folder in hand, we all decide what kind of family we want to be, and what kind of relationships we're willing to fight for. I paused at the doorway. I love you, all of you. But I love myself, too. And I'm not willing to disappear just to keep the peace. Then I walked out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back to see who followed. The days after the confrontation didn't feel triumphant. They felt quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that makes you wonder if you've just burned down the only bridge you ever had, or if, maybe, you were never really standing on one to begin with. My mother went silent. Not the passive-aggressive silence I'd grown up with. Not the sulking, or the sighs behind closed doors. This was different. It was calculated. She stopped responding to emails, didn't return my calls. Instead, she did something far more familiar. She told her version of the story to other people. Within days, I started getting calls from relatives. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Raymond. both of them carefully concerned, their voices soft, their tone polite, but their words unmistakably laced with judgment. "Your mother says you've been going through something lately," Aunt Patricia said. "She's worried about you. She says you've become distant." I paused, then answered gently, "Actually, I'm clearer than I've ever been. I just finally set boundaries." There was a long pause on her end. "Families should support each other," she said, as though I'd forgotten. "I agree," I replied. "Support should be mutual, not one-sided." Uncle Raymond was more direct. "Rachel, this is your sister. Family is family. What are you going to do? Cut her off just because your parents made mistakes?" "I'm not cutting her off," I said. "I'm cutting off the dynamic that hurt me. That's different." What I didn't say, but wanted to, was that they hadn't been there. Not for the birthdays, not for the graduations, not for the years I had worked, paid, and stayed silent. But someone else did reach out, someone I didn't expect. My cousin, Julia Bennett. "I just wanted you to know," she said over the phone. "Not everyone is buying your mom's version. Some of us, we've seen the way they treat you. This wasn't sudden. It was overdue." Her words landed softly, but deeply. Because when you've spent a lifetime being told you're imagining things, even a single voice saying, "I see it too," can feel like salvation. My father, true to the remorse he'd shown in that living room, began reaching out regularly. He didn't offer grand gestures or quick fixes, just quiet consistency. He asked about my job, my friends, my apartment. Not because he needed anything, but because he was finally trying to know me. 2 weeks after the confrontation, we met for coffee. "I've started seeing someone," he said quietly. "A therapist. I need to understand why I let it get this far." I nodded. Not out of approval, but out of acknowledgement. "That matters," I said. "More than you know. I never meant to make you feel invisible." He added. "I know," I replied. "But intention and impact are different." He nodded slowly. "That's exactly what she said, too." I smiled. Therapy was working. Chloe, on the other hand, was unraveling. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet identity crisis I could hear through every message she sent. One day, she'd text a long apology. The next, she'd accuse me of being vindictive. She didn't know who she was without the scaffolding our parents had built around her. And now that it was gone, she was struggling to stand on her own. The lease transition made things very real, very fast. Daniel Cho held firm. She needed to qualify on her own, or move out. With no credit history, limited income, and 2 part-time jobs, she couldn't. Our parents, still licking their wounds, didn't rush to cover for her either. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked during one of our calls. "Live on the street. You have options," I said. "Roommates, budget apartments, a second job. You'll figure it out." "That's easy for you to say," she snapped. "Everything's always been easy for you." "No, Chloe," I said gently. "Nothing has ever been easy. I just never asked you to carry the weight for me." There was a silence on her end, the kind that sounded like realization. I didn't press it. By the end of that month, she moved into a smaller place with a roommate named Haley, who worked at the same gallery. She didn't ask for help, and I didn't offer. But when she sent me a picture of the key in her hand, I replied, "Proud of you. Truly." She didn't respond right away, but a few hours later, she texted back, "Thanks. I'm trying." That was enough. Not closure, not forgiveness, but movement. And after so many years of standing still, that more than anything was what we all needed. It started with an email, not a call, not a text, Not even a voicemail laced with guilt. Just a single email from my mother. Rachel, your father suggests we consider family therapy to address the concerns you've raised. While I still feel you may have overreacted to some perceived slights, I'm willing to participate for the sake of family harmony. Let us know your availability. Mom. No apology, no ownership, but also no denial. For someone like my mother, that was a tectonic shift. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't know how to answer, but because I did. This wasn't a resolution. It was a door, slightly cracked, and as much as part of me wanted to slam it shut, another part knew what it had cost her to even open it. I replied the next morning, "Thanks for reaching out. I'm open to participating in therapy. Tuesday evenings work best. Let me know if that aligns with your schedules." A few days later, we had our first session with Dr. Marcus Holloway, a calm, deliberate presence who specialized in high-conflict family dynamics. His office felt neutral, no couches to sink into, just simple chairs arranged in a soft circle, no hierarchy, no center. My mother arrived last, her coat still buttoned, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Holloway began gently. I understand this family has experienced a recent rupture. Before we unpack the details, I'd like to ask, who wants to begin predictably?" My mother spoke first. "I just want to say," she began, her voice clipped, "that I never intended to make Rachel feel excluded or unsupported, but she's always been independent. She's always done things her own way. This sudden cutoff, it's been hurtful, not just to Chloe, but to all of us." Dr. Holloway nodded, then turned to me. "Rachel, would you like to respond?" I took a breath. This isn't about a sudden decision. It's about years of imbalance. Years of watching my accomplishments be ignored while Chloe's smallest efforts were praised. It's about being asked to give time, money, silence, while getting little in return. My mother opened her mouth to interrupt. Dr. Holloway raised a hand gently. "Let's let Rachel finish." I continued. "This isn't about blame. It's about recognition. I'm not asking for perfection, I'm asking to be seen. To not have to earn my place in this family with labor and compliance." There was a long pause. Then Dr. Holloway turned to Chloe. "What has this experience been like for you?" She looked unsure at first, then spoke, slowly. "I guess. I didn't realize how much was being done for me. I always just assumed Mom and Dad were helping. I never thought to ask where it came from." "Why do you think that is?" he asked. She shrugged. "I guess I was used to being taken care of." There it was. The truth. Not cruel, not dramatic, just honest. The rest of the session moved in waves. Resistance, acknowledgement, silence, then small softening. My mother didn't apologize, but she didn't deny, and for the first time, she listened without interrupting. It was something. Meanwhile, Chloe's financial situation became reality. She picked up a second job at a department store, 4 evenings a week after the gallery. She sent me a message one night after her shift. "I don't know how you did this for so long. The working, the budgeting. I'm exhausted." I typed back without judgment. "It wasn't easy, but it made me strong. And it'll make you strong, too." Her reply came hours later. "I hope so. I'm trying." There was a vulnerability in her words that felt new, not performative, not manipulative, just real. As for me, I continued focusing on my own healing. Weekly sessions with Dr. Elliott, rebuilding financial stability, reconnecting with parts of myself I'd set aside to make space for everyone else. I found I had more time, more mental energy, for things I'd forgotten I loved: reading, cooking, Long walks after work with no phone in my hand. About a month after our first therapy session, my mother reached out again. This time, she asked to meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at a quiet bistro near the lake. She arrived 5 minutes early, wore lipstick, brought printed notes. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, after we ordered, "about love being action, not just feeling. I don't agree with all of it, but I can see how you felt that way. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing." "Thank you," I said, "for listening. I don't want to lose you," she added quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Healing. I was learning. Didn't always look like a grand apology or dramatic turnaround. Sometimes, it looked like showing up on time, ordering your daughter's favorite salad, and deciding, however awkwardly, to try. 5 months after I walked out of my parents' house with a folder full of evidence and 28 years of hurt, we sat down together for our first full family dinner. It wasn't elegant or effortless. It was awkward, filled with stops and starts, like we were all trying to remember a language we hadn't spoken in years. But we were there, all of us, showing up, in our own uneven ways. Chloe arrived late, still in her Nordstrom uniform, her hair pulled back into a bun. She looked tired, but solid. And when she slid into the seat beside me, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Pride. "Sorry," she said, exhaling. "I came straight from work. Both of them." "How's the new apartment?" my dad asked. "Small," she said honestly, "but affordable. Brittany's a great roommate." "And the gallery?" I asked. "I might be getting promoted," she said, smiling for the first time that evening. "Assistant manager. Turns out showing up consistently counts for something." It does. More than she used to realize. My mother served dinner. Nothing elaborate, just a roast chicken and vegetables. But as she placed the platter on the table, she cleared her throat, like she was preparing to step off a cliff. "I've been thinking about what you said. Rachel," she began, not looking up, "about how we celebrate things, or don't." She paused. Everyone went still. "I want to acknowledge your promotion last year," she said. "I know it's late, but congratulations. You've always been exceptional. I'm sorry we didn't say so sooner." My fork paused midair. It wasn't grand, it wasn't theatrical, but it was sincere. And that, more than anything, made it real. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you probably know." We finished dinner with lighter conversation, work stories, neighborhood gossip, questions about Chloe's new budgeting spreadsheet, which she seemed both proud of and baffled by. Later that night, I got a message from her. "I'm trying to keep my grocery bill under $70 a week. How did you do this for years without losing your mind?" I smiled. "Coupons, rice, and a lot of patience." "You're amazing," she wrote back. For once, I let it land, without brushing it off, without shrinking from it. A few weeks later, Chloe called with news. "I've been saving," she said. "I think I can make a down payment on a small condo." I blinked. "Seriously?" "Yeah," she said. "The bank pre-approved me. It's nothing fancy. But it's mine. That's incredible." "Chloe, really? I've got a few places to look at this weekend. Would you come with me? I want your opinion." It was the first time she'd asked for my help without assuming it, without entitlement. Just a quiet request, filled with respect. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to." We spent that Saturday touring small units across the city. By mid-afternoon, she'd fallen in love with one, a modest one-bedroom in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The price was near the top of her range, but she couldn't hide the way her face lit up when we stepped inside. "What do you think?" she asked as we sat in a nearby coffee shop. 2 iced teas sweating between us. It's perfect, I said. But tight. Financially. You'd have very little margin. She nodded. Yeah, I know. I was thinking maybe I'd wait 6 more months, save a bit more. I looked at her for a long moment. Then made a decision I hadn't planned on making. What if I helped, I said. Not a lot. Just a portion of the down payment. Enough to lower your monthly costs. Her eyes widened. You'd do that? Yes. But only as a gift. No expectations. No strings. Just a sister helping a sister. She looked away. Then back at me. Is this really different from before, she asked quietly? From how Mom and Dad used your money without asking? It was a good question. One that showed how far she'd come. Yes, I said. Because it's my choice. Because you didn't assume it. Because our relationship now is built on honesty, not obligation. She nodded slowly. Then, yes. And thank you. I won't forget this. 2 weeks later, I sat beside her at the closing office. She signed the final document with a shaky hand and a teary smile. When the agent slid over the keys, she whispered, I can't believe I'm a homeowner. You earned it, I said, every square inch. Every. As we stood in her empty living room, champagne in plastic cups, she turned to me. You didn't just help me buy a home, she said. You helped me grow up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I felt like the one who helped us all move forward. The truth is, I didn't just take back my money, or my time, or the lease with my name on it. I took back something far more difficult to reclaim. My voice. For most of my life, I believed love meant endurance. That being the strong one meant staying quiet, carrying more, expecting less. I thought family meant sacrifice without recognition. That being needed was the same as being valued. But I know better now. Setting boundaries didn't make me cold. It made me clear. Speaking up didn't make me cruel. It made me whole. And walking away, for a moment, was what finally brought my family back into honest connection. Not perfect, but real. My mother still struggles. There are days she slips back into old patterns, days when her silence says more than her words ever could. But now, I name it, and more often than not, she hears me. My father shows up, not just in words, but in presence. He listens longer. He apologizes faster. He still gets things wrong, but he no longer pretends he doesn't. That matters. And Chloe, she's still learning, still stretching into the woman she was never asked to become. But now she pays her bills. She asks instead of assumes. She thanks instead of expects. We've stopped pretending that love is effortless, because it never was. It's work. It's truth. It's boundaries. And sometimes, it's uncomfortable silence that no one rushes to fill, because we've learned that growth often begins right there. I don't know if we'll ever be the kind of family that moves through life without friction. But I know this. I am no longer disappearing to keep the peace. I am no longer financing closeness I never felt. I am no longer measuring my worth by how much I can carry without complaint. I am here, fully. And if that makes the room quieter, so be it. Because I'd rather sit alone in truth than be surrounded in silence and still not be seen. And for anyone else who's been made to feel invisible, you're not. Not when you speak, not when you choose yourself, and definitely not when you walk away. Just long enough to remember who you are. Some stories don't end with closure. They end with clarity. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story made you feel seen, even just a little, drop a comment below. I'd love to know where you're listening from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself, even when it costs everything.